Have you guys ever watched these reseller advice videos that are all about how to get ahead of 99.9% of other resellers? Like, you know, they look like this one and this one and this one and this one. And ultimately, the advice that's given in these videos are either kind of empty, kind of don't go anywhere, or they're very run-of-the-mill type of advice, stay consistent, stay disciplined, or they're just some kind of motivational fluff type of video, right? And why is it, you know, they're framing this narrative of being 99.9% better than like other resellers and stuff, when ultimately, when you think of the whole e-commerce space, reselling is just the first step to what selling stuff online is. And it doesn't get any more basic than reselling stuff, because you just start with a couple of things from home. And essentially the stuff that you're selling are all established brands popularized by somebody else. If the item that you're selling today, like the clothing items, the Carhartt jacket, the Rock Revival jeans, the Levi's and stuff like that, if they weren't those brands, they wouldn't sell at all, because people are specifically looking for those brands, especially when you think about the clothing space and how people are searching for stuff. Without the word Carhartt in the jacket, that jacket would pretty much be invisible in the huge catalog on eBay or Amazon or pretty much anywhere you go. So when you think about, you know, trying to be 99, this is the tutorial. This is the beginning of stuff. So why isn't the ultimate goal not to nudge you towards becoming a private labeler yourself? Because only when you have replenishable items that finally take off, that you're not trying to chase the next sale over and over again. So now you're not experiencing, you know, summer slowdown or bad quarter fours because I sell vintage clothing and people don't want to give people used goods for Christmas, right? And then on January, because what I sell is more of what people want more than what people need in the collectible area, people are tapped out from all of the gift giving in Christmas, so that in January, my sales are going to be like, why go through all this stuff when it's basically your setup that's causing all of this? And all of your resale gurus are keeping you within this cycle and telling you, hey, don't give up, keep going this way. You know, one of the things that often happens, right, is that we all understand that doing business is difficult. So we try to motivate each other to, hey, don't give up and stay the course and stuff. But what's very dangerous is that when you try to motivate somebody and be very suggestive of them in the wrong direction, you see what I'm saying? Just keep staying as a reseller, just keep doing this stuff. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about today, right? So recently I had a couple of subscribers. I can't remember all of them. One of them was Monica Davis. So shout out to Monica Davis. They recommended Cayley Elaine to me, right? So I decided to subscribe and watch a couple of her videos. Now I'm going to pick out a couple of her most recent ones. Okay. I don't want to misrepresent what she says, and she could have changed her mind from somewhere before. So we're just going to talk about one of her more recent videos. And in the videos, these are the information that she puts out. And I want to give my insight as a 20+ year importer and product developer on doing business in e-commerce space, and how I would I essentially disagree with what she is saying. So this is a clip of Cayley Elaine specifically giving out the advice to raise your average sale price, which generally I agree with. If you are flipping items, it is much more manageable to increase your average sale price rather than to increase the volume. Because if you just increase the volume, it could get very chaotic and you could reach a physical ceiling on this. But if you are going to raise the average sale price, then usually what happens is that as you increase the sale price, you also need to increase your knowledge when it comes to selling higher selling price items.
So how this looks in real life is, let's say you have two sellers both doing the same thing. They consistently list 20 items a day, and they are both at reseller Nirvana selling 20 items a day. And let's say their average sale price is $30. And so let's say seller one decides that they want to increase their average sale price by $5. Regardless of if they think it's possible, they start moving forward. And seller number two says, I don't think it's possible. I'm not sure that I'm going to find enough of those higher ASP items in my area. So instead, what I'm going to do, I'm going to give it a few months, and I am going to see if, as I'm doing my normal thing over the next several months, do I start to find more items that have a higher ASP? And if so, that's when I'll pull the trigger.
Okay, so Essentially, the spreadsheet over here is a depiction of seller one versus seller two, and then what would happen over the course of a year. And then ultimately that you see like the yearly sales over here is $4,200 difference, right? However, just for the sake of time and shortening this video, I will tell you right now that she never gets into the how of raising your ASP other than the willingness to try. So when you look at exactly what is being shown on this spreadsheet over here, it's not so much about that, seller one's path is better than seller two's path. No, this is if seller one's path was successful, then it would be a $4,200 difference at the end of the year. And that's basically what the simulation is. However, I made a different argument here, and I just want you guys to see that I actually posted this on her channel over here, and I'm going to read for you exactly what I wrote. Okay, so at timestamp 8 minutes and 30 seconds, increasing your average sale price ASP isn't just about picking higher ticket items. It demands a higher level of product knowledge. So whether it's fashion, electronics, or collectibles, moving up the ASP ladder means entering markets with a narrow buyer pool, right? More scrutiny and less margins forever, because people are paying more for this stuff. They're going to be a lot more picky about that. So you suggest raising the ASP is the smarter move. I totally agree with that. But you never break down how beyond the willingness to try and maybe learn behind your paywall, because ultimately this video ends up with her saying, sign up for my classes, which I'm not against. Okay. Whether they're good classes or bad classes is another story. But for people who want to sell a premium for their knowledge, because mentorship is a type of shortcut in life, I totally agree with that. And there's nothing wrong with that part. Okay. The question is, is your mentor good or bad? That's all there really is to it. But the idea of, asking for a compensation for the knowledge and trade there, I'm not against that. Okay. So that spreadsheet, it doesn't prove whether seller one made the smarter move than seller two. It's just a simulation of what could happen if seller one successfully raises their ASP, right? But that is a big if. If they miss, they're left with cash tied up in unfamiliar, slow-moving inventory, maybe even items they don't know how to price, market, or authenticate. So when you think about selling sneakers, anybody could sell regular sneakers. Now you're going to move on to high-end sneakers, or you went from handbags to high-end handbags. You went from regular watches to high-end watches. What do you know about the high-end stuff? That is the question, right? So you would have to dive deeper into those hyper niches in order to qualify for that. So seller two, on the other hand, is playing a tighter, more conservative game. They're sticking to what they already know so that there's lower risk, more consistent sales, and fewer surprises. We've played games like this on television all the time. Do you want to go for higher risk and then you could make more money? Or you want to go for lower risk and then just walk away with the guaranteed money? Deal or no deal is like that, right? So when you think of yes, the higher ISP can bring in more revenue, but that's only if the seller qualifies for that strategy, and therefore you would be successful in doing so, right? Because Tekken Sports likes to mention the yacht salesman making $100,000 on a single deal.
So you can spend all year, jump on the telephone, contact every single marina in the country and say, do you have a yacht for sale? Maybe you can find one yacht, one listing, and make $100,000. However, it's going to take a lot of telephone calls, a lot of boots on the ground, a lot of contacts in order to make that work. Or you can get 100,000 items, make 100,000 listings, make $1 each, and at the end of the year, both of these people are in the same position.
One of these guys is going to be in the laying down position, but that person didn't start his career selling yachts. So let me get back to this video.
And so over the course of a year, these two sellers have much different paths. So let's say seller number one decides on month one that they are going to take their $30 average sale price and bump it up $5. So the goal would be to increase it to $35. Let's say on month two, they actually only achieve increasing it by $2 because we want to be realistic. But then on month three, because they started and they realized that it's possible, they ended up increasing their average sale price to $35 per average just a couple of months later.
Okay, so yes, absolutely possible. You just need a willingness to try. However, what you're leaving out is that if we're going to actually be practical and realistic about this whole thing, then we have to, admit the fact that when you are going to raise your average sale price on your items, you're most likely going to be in a different pricing category, right? You're going to be in a different price bracket. And those items in a different price bracket would require different kinds of knowledge. If you were to sell basic electronics versus selling DSLR cameras, well, what do you know about cameras? You would have to invest in that time and knowledge in order to do so. And that's the part that's being left out here. So to just go off and say, well, this person is just selling calculators and that person's making so much more money selling DSLR cameras. Yeah, but you have to get into that space, right? You have to work your way up to becoming a house flipper, to becoming a car salesman, to becoming a yacht salesman. And that is my point. All right, guys, so I'm going to play a little bit of the advice that she gives. Now, keep in mind that normally I don't like to take people out of context. I don't like to misrepresent what they say. But however, oftentimes when I play the full clip, it's just way too long. So I'm going to do my best to try to keep things in as much context as possible, as well as the idea that most of the rebuttals that I have for everything that she says is just very, very simple rebuttals anyways. So listen to what she has to say.
And make sure you're selling only what buyers are looking for in that moment. For example, I've mentioned to you guys recently,
shouldn't you always be selling what buyers are looking for, not just in that moment?
That my sales did take a dip at the beginning of the year simply because of time of the year. And a way I was able to pivot and turn my sales around is I noticed that buyers, because they felt money constraints, like they do every single year at the beginning of the year because it's tax time. My buyers specifically, I noticed were only picking up things between like $25 and $35 on average, and they were picking up less of my higher end items. I decided to pivot and start bulking up on the more bread and butter thing. And because I've done that, I have put a Band-Aid on my sales until we get to a higher sales period.
Right. So normally she recommends that you try to level up the value of your store by increasing the ASP. However, during the slow sales time, you're supposed to lower your ASP. So, raising your ASP good, lowering your ASP good. You know what I mean? Now, the thing about this up and down ASP kind of thing, right, is that I have a different opinion of exactly why this happens, because essentially you have Christmas, and Christmas is a gift giving season, and people usually save up for the whole gift giving, and the item swapping, gift swapping stuff, right? And then what happens is that over in January, people are usually tapped out from all the gift giving that they have to do. However, if you are selling items that are essential needs that people need more than they want, then you essentially probably wouldn't have this issue. Also, other resellers have reported, like people like Cha-Ching King and stuff like that. They specifically explained that as a reseller, especially of a lot of vintage clothing, people don't want to give people vintage clothing as a Christmas gift. I mean, some people might be okay with it. Some circles are like that, but essentially people don't want to give people used items as a Christmas present, right? And that's why usually during their Q4s, the sales would dip for that particular type of seller. So let me come over here because she goes into like some bonus tips, and I don't want this clip to be way too long, but she goes into a way forward, and I want you to hear what she has to say.
Out of all the options that you jotted down, which one seems the most likely to solve your problem? Or maybe more importantly, consider how quickly actions that you make will have an effect on your sales if you're in a really tight spot. At the end of the day, only you can know what the best solution is for your business and your situation.
If at the end of the day, like only you can know, then what is the purpose of all of these videos? So I'm not going to nitpick on that too much, but I just find it odd to like add that, you know what I mean? Probably omit that from the video.
Because even though we might all be experiencing similar issues, we're all in different situations, which might require different solutions. So that is how I would work through that framework in order to come up with solutions for your business and to counteract those slow sales. I want to give you guys some bonus things here, which is at the end of the day, there are several things that work for pretty much all businesses experiencing slow sales, regardless of the situation. You can sort by your most liked items and send out aggressive offers. By doing this, you're targeting people who already have the intent to buy because they've already saved or liked your item. And so at this point, they're just waiting on a reason to go through with a purchase.
Right. But you wouldn't make sales for items that sell very good because those items are already sold. You would only do sales for items that are not selling, right? And part of the problem of being a reseller is definitively putting rules on your items that you could declare as a mistake after a certain amount of days. Possibly you would do this for different kinds of categories or for every single item that you pick up, depending on the type of seller you are. For example, if it's a video game item and you know it's supposed to move very quickly, but it's not, you might declare it as a mistake after 30 days versus clothing items, you might declare it as a mistake after 90 days. So what happens when you declare it as a mistake? It is time for an exit strategy. We're going to lower the item's price. We're going to do a sale. We're going to go heavier on the promoted ad to try to get even more views so that we can finally get rid of this thing. Either way, you're going to start taking less value. You're going to start losing a little bit of margins in order to recoup your money back. So when you think of what she's saying right now, why do this in the slow season? Shouldn't you be doing this all year round anyways as you monitor your sales? Anything that is beyond a 30-day marker, 60-day marker, a 30-day marker that you have personally set for yourself, this is what you should be doing in order to exit that item for the respect of opportunity costs. So why would we intentionally wait for the slow season in order to do that? So I barely think that this is a tip specifically just for combating slow season. This is something that you should be doing all the time because you are a one-off seller and you just have way too many SKUs.
You can run a sale. Squeeze out as much money as possible during this slow sales time to recoup some money to be able to pay your bill.
If it is already a slow sales time and people are already tapped for money, then running a sale at this time is even unlikely to sell, right? If anything, you should do this during the up times of the stuff that isn't moving. You just have to keep dibs on exactly how long you've been holding on to things. You want to do things when, people have money and you're feeling that the economy is very good right now. People have the disposable income, but I'm currently stuck with this item. Let me run the sale right now. Why wait until January during the coldest season of the year?
Bills to possibly reinvest into inventory. Which brings me to my next tip, which is you can always work on lowering your cost of goods to squeeze out a little bit more net profit per item. But I caution you with this one because typically when people lower their cost of goods, the quality of the items that they have drop. So you want to make sure not only do you lower your cost of goods, but you also lower your cost of goods while still picking up the same quality of items.
If you could already do that, why wouldn't you have done that yesterday? I don't understand this piece of advice, because you're saying to lower the cost of goods, meaning to buy it cheaper without losing the quality. So if you could buy a comparable item or the same items, all of the same quality, right? But you could pay less for it. Why weren't you already paying less for it? It's like we're too successful in our up season, so we're just going to pay more for it. But now we're going to intention. Like, how do you make that happen and then maintain the same quality? Like this whole thing kind of doesn't add up in either direction, right? So why aren't you doing this anyways? Do you have to wait for a bad downturn season in order to improve on your margins? When is it a good time or a bad time to make more money? That doesn't, I don't know.
You can rework stale listings to get them to bump up in the algorithm if they've just been sitting, or possibly even remove them. I'm not going to go on a whole rant about SEO or the algorithm. But as you guys know, the more items you have in your store that buyers are not going through with a purchase, it is hurting you in the search. And so if you've got anything that is hindering,
I really need a definition for the whole hurting you in the search, because you just said, and I agree with it, that you could just revise your listings in order to change them so that they will sell, right? You could always change up the title in some way. You could improve on the photos. You could do a better description. You could lower the price. You could run sales. You could do all sorts of stuff in order, like, you don't necessarily need to end sell similar or, start up a new listing or anything like that. You could always revise your listing in order to get it to sell. That's exactly how eBay works.
You and pulling your sales in the opposite direction, it's a good idea to combat that as well.
Why? Either you have items that you are stuck with, but why would they pull your business in the opposite direction? It's it's one thing to have an anchor in your store, right? And this is dead weight for you, okay? But it's another thing to actively be pulled in another direction, right? That would that kind of description would be both toxic and cancerous. So I wouldn't say the item is toxic or cancerous, as opposed to maybe a behavior of constantly picking up too many items that are unknown and doesn't sell very well, taking on, like, intentionally taking on too much risk in your business. Yeah, those things could be, pulling in the opposite direction. But when you're talking about just like a regular slow season or items that didn't sell, so let's go ahead and find an exit strategy by reducing the cost of the goods and stuff like that, right? No, the cost of the sale. I wouldn't say that's pulling in the other end.
Oh, and you can do that by reworking those stale listings.
I don't want to
potentially
just keep
even
nitpicking.
removing them out of the store if you shouldn't have picked them up in the first place. You can list more quality items, and I specifically included more quality items because the same thing can happen that we talked about when you're attempting to lower your cost of goods, which is you don't want to see the quality of your items drop.
This is a really odd piece of advice, because it would be suggesting that, like, you weren't already listing quality pieces to begin with. So now you need to list more quality stuff because you were listing junk. So this becomes very kind of victim blaming, isn't it? It's like the assumption that, like, everything that you picked up, like, you had no estimation whatsoever that it was going to, like, nobody intentionally picks up stuff that they don't think is going to sell, right? So I'm going to try this because it's iffy. Like, nobody thinks that. People try this stuff because they think it's going to move. They think it's a gem. They think it's going to be good. Well, why would you waste your money on any other way, especially if it's a business decision and it is the idea of that I'm going to source stuff in order to sell them. So again, like all of these examples of tips seem very odd.
So if you're going to list more, make sure it is the same quality that you've been listing. And lastly, you could cross-post. Now, if you already have items that are undesirable, cross-posting them to another platform is unlikely that they're going to sell. And so you might be wasting your time by cross-posting.
Okay.
Because at the end of the day, cross-posting only means you get more views on the items. They don't convert into sales. If you've already got items that are proven to not convert into sales, I would work on reworking them or getting them out of your store, and then purchasing better items for the future. But if you have items that are desirable and you just want to increase the likelihood that they might sell quicker, then you can cross-post those quality items to other platforms, because that's going to give you a different buyer base and more likelihood of that item selling.
Well, she's saying is kind of true, but the issue is that if the item is already desirable, the question would be, what do you define as desirable? So something that's going to move very quickly because it's desirable, and obviously desirable items are going to have a high STR. So if that is the case, what is a high STR item? What is a desirable item? Something that would move in within 5 days, 4 days, you would consider that as a high STR item, right? So if your item is definitely going to move around, within a week anyways, why do you have to cross list? If it is a, quote unquote, as we're defining what a desirable item is, why do you need to cross list this thing? Suppose you went ahead and cross listed this item, right? And let's say you didn't cross list this item and it was a desirable item and then it sold in 5 days. But now you cross listed this item on eBay, Depop, Poshmark, Mercari, like these 4 platforms all at the same time. And then it sold in 3 days. But in the 3 days it sold on eBay and not the other 3 platforms. So was it worth your time to cross list onto those other 3 platforms? Because your main platform where the most sales are is going to be on eBay anyways. So, again, when we really start to scrutinize exactly what the advice is, it starts to be, I don't know, not very useful. Ultimately, I don't have anything personally against reselling or resellers, because everybody needs to start off somewhere. It is the thought leaders who are the grifters in this space, particularly because eBay reselling is where most people start off. And when you're first starting off, you are very easily susceptible to the misinformation out there, because a lot of the people in the reselling space have never done more business other than just reselling. So therefore, the advice oftentimes become very, very misguided. Again, I take no pleasure into calling people out and tearing them down. It doesn't feel good to do that, okay? But the thing is that the information, we got to call it is what it is. That's why you'll never hear me make any type of personal attacks whatsoever. Now, to prove exactly what I'm saying is that in upper spaces, right, where you are white labeling, private labeling, when you are an Amazon FBA, you can't do that to people over there. People are a lot more keen. People are a lot more privy to what the situation is. And in order to prove that to you guys, I want to show you this particular video over here. So I'm just going to spoil it right now and tell you that he is pretty much destroyed in the comment section over here, right? So this is Rake and Profit, and Rake and Profit also positions himself as another, you know, YouTube educator and stuff in the eBay area, as well as the Amazon FBA area. And you'll see what I mean in a second. Just listen to what he has to say. For those of you out there who have done Amazon FBA, you'll see what I mean.
The first mistake that people make when selling on Amazon is that they actually sell as an FBM seller instead of an FBA seller. As an FBM seller, you're a merchant, which means you store everything at your house. You have to pick, pack, fulfill, deal with customer service. You have to, at the end of the day, deal with every single transaction one by one by one. At the end of the day, I found from my 8 years of experience that typically you're going to make less money. It's going to take you a lot longer to fulfill every item. And since you're selling as a merchant, you're not eligible to be a prime seller. So you're not getting that prime bump. People want to buy from Amazon and they trust Prime. Selling as a merchant, unless you're in a special merchant program, which most people don't know how to do, and you have to hit certain metrics, you're not going to get that prime bump. So if you like to make more money and spend less time, I highly recommend going FBA. Yes, the fees are a little higher, but you're still going to make more money because of that prime bump being an FBA seller.
Okay, so I want to show you over here in the comments, right? One of the comments over here specifically says, not everyone is going to jump into a business idea shelling out thousands of dollars on product to go the FBA route. There's nothing wrong with starting out on FBM to get your feet wet and getting familiar, et cetera, et cetera. Exactly, right? You know, ultimately, at the end of the day, when you do business, it's really not up to you to declare how much money you're going to make. You try to remain as optimal as possible in your business settings, trying to make the best business decisions as you can. And when your item starts to get more traction, if it goes viral, if it blows up, great. If it's only semi-successful, moving like say anywhere between 5 to 10 units every day, we could still declare that as successful as we develop our next item, and next item, so that we build up a lot of steady items so that we have steady sales. That's how business is supposed to work. So another comment over here specifically goes into FBA fees or storage are very high, and a beginner with a smaller capital reserve might benefit starting out FBM and make 5 or 20K before switching over to FBA. Another one over here says, in your 8 years of experience, I think you're taking for granted the learning curve involved with setting up an Amazon store. FBM is the way to go when you're first getting started though, especially if you're new. Right. Everybody is saying this. This is what I mean. When you are in this space where people are much more advanced, you can't mess with them the way that, you know, what's going on in the reseller space, because people who do this stuff, they are much more invested, and therefore they've spent a lot more time researching and understanding the system and stuff. So when you start giving out advice and saying things like this and crazy blanket statements like what Rake and Profit is saying right now, that's what happens in the comment section.